Princess and the Pea, retold by John Check, illustrated by Bernard Oberdick. A long time ago, there lived a prince who was looking for someone very special to marry, and that someone had to be a real princess. The prince met lots of young ladies who wanted to marry him. Some of them were very pretty, some were very rich, and some were very smart, but none of them was a real princess, and so he kept looking and hoping and yearning. The prince wore out his shoes dancing with all the eligible young ladies. He wore himself out going to parties with them, and he talked with them until he was so tired that he couldn't talk anymore. But still, he couldn't find a real princess. Perhaps, said the king, there are no more real princesses. Maybe, said the queen, all the real princesses have already found their princess. Besides, dear son, you know you are very, very picky. And so it went. More parties and dances and conversations for another year, until one night, in the middle of a ferocious thunderstorm, there was a knock at the door of the castle. The king was up late. The thunder had awakened him, you see, and so he went to the door. Outside stood a young woman. She was soaking wet. Please give me shelter, she implored. The worried king asked how she came to be alone in the night. My family and I were traveling through the forest. It was so dark and stormy that we lost each other. I walked until I saw the light by the castle. By now, the queen too had awakened. She took the young woman with her to a guest room to give her dry clothing and to settle her in for the night. Who is your family? Asked the queen. I am a king's daughter, though you wouldn't know it to look at me, the young woman said. Indeed, her clothes were torn and muddy, and her face was weary from traveling. Thought the queen. We'll soon see if she's a real princess. Real princesses are very, very sensitive. And so the queen called the maids and the footmen and ordered them to bring 20 mattresses and 20 feather comforters to the bedroom. Just stack them up high, she told them. We want our guest to be comfortable after her ordeal. While a warm bath was being prepared, the servants piled up mattresses and feather comforters until they nearly reached the ceiling. Then they set a ladder next to the bed so their guest could climb up. After the servant left, the queen took one small green pea that she had gotten from the kitchen and tucked it in as far under the bottom mattress as her arm could reach. When the young visitor was ready for bed, the queen helped her climb the ladder to the top of the stack of the mattresses and comforters, blew out the candle, and wished her good night and pleasant dreams. In the morning, when the young woman awoke and joined the royal family for breakfast, the queen asked her how she had slept. Oh, I barely slept a wink last night, she replied. I must have strained my back in the forest because it felt like I was sleeping on a stone and not on a stack of mattresses and feather comforters that you prepared for me. The queen knew at once that this must be a real princess. She wanted to tell her son about the test, but she could not get his attention. He was gazing lovingly into the eyes of the princess, and she into his, and they were both smiling. After breakfast, the king showed the princess around the castle while his men searched the forest for her family to bring them safely to the shelter of the palace. When the queen was finally alone with the prince, she said to him, I think she's the one, son. Then she told him about placing the pea under the stack of the guests' mattresses. Only a real princess would have felt a pea in that bed, she said. Thank you, mother, said the prince, but I didn't need a pea to tell me she is a real princess. I could see it in the gentleness of her eyes, hear it in the softness of voice, and feel it in the kindness of her heart. And so the prince and the princess were married. Now you might be asking, whatever became of the pea? Well, some say the pea was put in a museum. Others say the pea was cooked in the prince and princess's wedding soup. But still others say the queen kept it to remind herself of her son's wisdom in recognizing his real princess.